Arsenal come streaming forward now in surely what will be their last attack. A good ball by Dixon, finding Smith. But Thomas charging through the midfield. Thomas, it's up for grabs now. Thomas, right at
the end. Hello and welcome to Gooners in the USA. Mike, has Arson been fired yet?
It has not happened, but the rumors are swirling. It could happen by the end of this trip.
I don't think it happens until we are officially out of the Europa League.
Well, that could happen on this trip.
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know how long you're there for. So, hey, weird pod for us because we're kind of getting sick, I think, of talking about the same old bullshit. I was listening to Arscast today, and they were saying the same thing. And it's just, I think, people who have dedicated listeners trying to fill the void. But Mike is over in England. He did get to go to Brighton away, and he also got to go to the AGM today. So we are going to quickly talk about just Brighton. I've got a couple questions for him, and then we're going to kind of hand it over to him because we know the world of Twitter is blowing up like crazy, and Mike had a front row seat to the events. So Mike,
it was in the third row.
Oh, third row.
Let's be honest with our listeners, because if nothing,
I thought you were big time.
I got relegated to the third row of like 70,000. No, it was. But we'll talk about that at the end. And it was the Supporters Trust AGM, not the actual club AGM. Just to be clear.
So, before we start, I just want to quickly read off. I don't know if you've seen the football365.com, the Arsenal 2017-18 ridiculous statistics, but here are some of them. Okay.
Is that one of them website thingies?
Yes. I was like, what are you talking? So it's March 4th, and we can officially no longer win the Premier League. We've lost 10 games in the Premier League this season. The only other campaign under Arson was in 05-06. We've lost 8 away Premier League matches this season. Only West Ham, Huddersfield, Stoke, Everton, and West Brom have lost more. Since Gen 1, we would be in 15th position in the Premier League. Only Burnley, Huddersfield, West Brom have fewer points. Let's see here. Arsenal have lost 5 of their last 6 in all competitions. By comparison, City have lost 5 of their last 53, and Liverpool have lost 5 of their last 36.
So the sky is basically falling, is what you're telling me.
Well, this is my favorite one out of all of these. Henrik Mkhitaryan has lost 4 Premier League games in 2 months at Arsenal. He lost 5 in 18 months at Manchester United. Shit.
Yeah, life is good at these times.
Yeah.
At least I have a good view at the moment.
Yeah. And we'll get to that in a second as well. And Alexis Sanchez is still our second top goal scorer with 8 goals, and he left the club 2 months ago. So, and Giroud also is our third top goal scorer, who also left 2 months ago.
And our top goal scorer is Ashley Cole.
Yeah. So tell us about where you're at right now.
I am currently staring out at a dark but beautiful Highbury pitch. Joey, the infamous and lovable Joey Murphy, and I are living in sin together. We haven't told our wives; only one of us actually has one. But yeah, we're living in sin in Highbury in the North Bank, in an apartment that we found on Airbnb, which it's been a dream of mine since I started coming over here a few years ago to actually stay in one of these places, and this was the opportunity. So thank you to our Airbnb host. But it's just, I've walked on the grounds a few times, and it just brings back a lot of memories and chills. And I know people are sick of hearing me talk about the years I was in London standing on the North Bank, but now I'm literally standing in the North Bank, and it's cool. So if you ever get the chance, they're not that expensive. If you could just find one that's available, if you come over here, an Airbnb, you too can live the dream.
Excellent.
Joey's been sleeping for hours, of course.
That son of a bitch. So you were at Brighton.
Yeah.
I kind of went into the match thinking that we could easily lose. I don't think anyone has been going into matches recently with confidence, but how was the vibe amongst the away support? I saw that you were drinking a lot of beers beforehand. Were the conversations in the pub tense? Was it, hey, this is where we're going to get back on track? How was the vibe?
Well, it is hard to get confident about an away game this season. I mean, certainly an away game, a home game against an Everton or even if it were Brighton, you'd expect to win. I don't think anyone expected to win. I think people thought we certainly should and could win. But it was very reminiscent in a sense to the Palace game last year that I also had the misfortune of being at, where I will say it was a tense time going in. We all knew kind of everything was on the edge, but the away support goes into those games for the vast majority of those supporters go into those games singing positive in full voice behind the team 100%. And just like in the Palace game last season, the first half of this game against Brighton, it all started going wrong pretty quickly and pretty wrong. Uh-huh. And I said to Joey, because we were sitting there basically, I was saying if we get up early, then this could be a fun experience and and a good outcome. If we go down early, it will get toxic pretty quickly. And I'll say when the second goal went in is when the "We want Wenger out" chants started going, and they were loud, really loud. I don't know if you could hear them on TV. I'm sure you could.
Couldn't.
Well, the away fans are saying we want. Well, I mean, again, it's not all of them, but audible chanting of "We want Wenger out," say "We want Wenger out," and then of course the most insulting and the thing that just drives me crazy, but I'd do the same thing if I were them, is the other 3/4 of the stadium, the Brighton end, singing "We want you to stay." I mean, how does that make him feel on the bench? I mean, can you imagine being Arsene Wenger and hearing the opposing fans at their stadium talking about how much they want you to stay, and your boys and girls are saying "We want you to go"?
Yeah, I can't imagine this is fun for him anymore. I mean, when you look at the bigger picture, regardless of how much money you're making, at the end of the day, an extra year at this club isn't going to move zeros in your bank account. So I don't see how he has any passion left. You don't see it.
Remind me to circle back to that later when we talk about the AGM.
Yeah.
About that exact point, because I do have a comment to make on that.
But if you're him and you're sitting there, it's something that you expect at maybe a rival club, but not when you're going to Brighton. It's just, if you're at Tottenham, if you're at Chelsea, a London derby, then I get those chants. But when you're away to Brighton, I mean, it's bad, man.
And it happened at Palace last year too. I mean, the Palace fans were singing, Wenger in chant. I mean, it was the same thing. There was a lot of similarities. I will say though that Palace last year, just to make the comparison, there was anger. There was vitriol. It was palpable. It was a night game, so it was just kind of like that tinder box, whatever the expression is. It just kind of felt like it was all about to pop off. Not so much against Brighton, because I think you have a lot of fans who, frankly, are just resigned to what's going on now. And they're down there saying, "I can't believe I traveled for this, and this is the outcome that we're getting." So there was frustration, but it was almost just like, I'm so sick of this. Not I'm gonna rush out onto the field and confront the players type of vitriol.
So the first goal goes in for Brighton, and it's really early in the match. What was the vibe then? I mean, kind of walk us through what everyone was like. Was it a, well, oh shit, or was it a here we go again?
It was definitely a here we go again. I mean, you've got, if I remember, it's always harder for me to remember the games I'm at because of everything that's going on. But I think that was the one that Petr Cech swatted at, basically knocked it right onto the foot of the goal scorer. And it's just I don't have my bell, but the defense was at 6 and 7s in the back. It's just the same mistakes happening over and over again. And to Petr Cech's credit, he took responsibility for it, but that doesn't really make the goal go away. But yeah, I mean, it was was really before anybody could get too optimistic about anything. We're a goal down already due to just complete incompetence. So, there was some groans and some grumbles and some just kind of people standing around with a stunned look on their face, like, I cannot believe this is happening again. By the time the second goal went in, again, it was just the anger started to bubble up a little bit more, and the tension started to bubble up. But it just gets where you go expecting to lose, and it's not going to matter whether it's Milan on Thursday, where I don't even know why I'm bothering, other than the fact that I love this club. But it's just I don't see an away match in the Premier League this season again that we should be able to feel like we're favored and to win, as long as things are the way they are right now.
Yeah, and the bad, typically, Mike, when we're in this, every team goes through a run of patches where there's 2 or 3 losses in a row, 4 losses, and in a short amount of time. And the problem with this side is they're coming against teams. You can say, all right, we lost to City twice. We played like shit. City are very good. But when you lose to Ostersund, when you lose to Brighton, and in the way that you... Swansea, but it's in the manner of which we're doing it. It's not like we're getting unlucky, right? It's not like we're shooting ourselves in the foot and they're grabbing late winners or we're giving up a lead. It's just there's just no dynamic play. There's no leaders on the pitch. There's nothing. And I think the fans are just starting to get to that point where it's sad.
The number of people the number of people that you can start pinning the blame on from week to week to week is dwindling.
Yeah.
And it's
in the past it was, well, such and such had a bad game, such and such had a bad game, and now it's just a matter of, well, there's only one person.
They don't seem like they prepared or cared about what they were doing out there, and you can read it on the players' faces that they don't look like they don't care. They look like they don't know what is happening with them. Like they look like they've been drugged and they're confused and they're upset, and they know that they are better talented players than the players that they're playing against. I mean, maybe not when they're going up against City, but in general, and they just don't know how to put it together. It's a bunch of confused professionals making a lot of money who cannot figure out on their own without any type of format or coaching or drilling or any of that. And it's just so broken that, I don't know how they're expecting to fix it without making a change.
No. The biggest takeaway from me from the last 5 weeks of matches where we've seen absolute dog shit on the pitch, was the second match against City, and I just want to say one thing real quick. When we were 3-0 down, there was no tactical change made. There was nothing, no movement.
No substitutes made until like the 84th minute.
Right. There was nothing early enough, at the 50th minute mark that suggested, hey, let's go ahead and change something. But what really stuck out to me more than anything else was that 3-0, 70 minutes left. Pep Guardiola was in his touch box on the sidelines, barking orders to his players. Arsene sat on the bench sulking. And when you're a manager who is 33 points ahead of the team that you're playing, it's not about the fact that he was trying to put more goals in the back than that. He was using that 25 minutes, 30 minutes as a training opportunity to right the players' wrongs. You know what I mean? Yeah. He was still coaching his players. And one quote that Thierry Henry said today about Pep Guardiola, or maybe this was earlier in the week, was he learned more things at 30 about football than he thought he knew. Now you're talking about someone who's won almost everything in his career. He's with Pep for a couple seasons, and he says, I learned so much more from this man. If you're Arsene and you want to prove to the Arsenal fan base that you haven't given up, you have to show it. Its action speaks louder than words. all we hear is something about fucking someone getting dressed with random articles of clothing and how to put them on.
Yeah, trousers and shit.
I don't care about that. I want to. If we're down 3-0, I want to see you barking orders at your players. I want to see you on the sideline still trying to fix things. Give Callum Chambers a little bit of help. Do something.
It isn't even that I want to see him. I mean, it can be for show sometimes. I think a lot of times.
And
with
I'll
Jurgen
take
Klopp,
that at this point.
well, yeah, no, and I don't blame you for that. But I mean, what I'm saying is, I agree with you about Pep. It's not for show. It's not overstated. I mean, it's not Jurgen Klopp, doing somersaults on the sideline, while he's winning a game because of some bad call. I mean, some of that is just histrionics for the sake of histrionics, like the Canio used to do. But with Pep, you're right. He's basically got an eye towards the next game already, perhaps, or an eye towards something he's going to mention in practice the next day. And you just get the sense that his mind is working the whole time. Mm-hmm. And whether Wenger's standing or sitting, whether he's on the touchline or whether he's on the bench, he just looks like he's feeling sorry for himself. He's wringing his hands. He's gritting his teeth. But he's doing nothing.
Well, and Mike, a really good manager, when you're 3-0 up against the side that's a wounded dog, you are thinking about your next match, which was Chelsea. You're thinking about the way they're going to play. You're probably setting up your tactics a little different. I guarantee you at halftime, he said to his boys, if within 20 minutes of that second half we're still up by 3, we're going to make these tactical switches to get ready for next weekend. Because at that point, you're still in the match, you're still playing the game, but you're still going to win. And he's also probably thinking Champions League because they have a match coming up. So it's just, that's the type of manager you want, and I'm dejected that our manager just seems to not give a shit anymore. Now, I don't know at Brighton if he was on the touchlines, because I was kind of doing the watch my son while the game was on, and I paid enough attention to it, but it didn't seem like he had that passion. He didn't have that drive, and I'll say the same thing I've said in the past. Iwobi left Koscielny for dead at one point in the match. Koscielny didn't do a fucking thing to try and right that wrong. Didn't try and go over and coach him. Didn't put a hand on his shoulder and say, hey, you fucked up, you got to track back. They didn't do anything. It was flat. It's just, this isn't the Arsenal.
Diabolical.
Yeah, absolutely terrible. And that kind of leads to my point of confidence, right? When you're a fan base and you're traveling away or you're going home, and you're seeing the 11 and we're not playing well, the worst thing that can happen is you look at your starting 11 and fucking Iwobi's in the team. Because then everyone thinks, shit. And there's already enough hate on Bellerin, Xhaka. It's just, this team right now.
Nice assist from Xhaka, I must say.
I thought he played not great, but he didn't, he wasn't dog shit like the majority of the team. But anyway, any other thoughts on Brighton, Mike?
No, I mean it was hopeful at the end of the first half when they pulled back that goal. I was running out to grab a beer with about a minute left in the half, and I had to tell some other folks who had left maybe 10 or 15 minutes earlier. I won't name names, but they didn't even realize Aubameyang had scored. So I brought them the news. But the whole second half just felt like a dead rubber at that point. I mean, we didn't put the pressure on them as much, not to use that awful putting the pressure on phrase, but I mean, we just never seemed like we were really going to get back in the game. And the Brighton fans, I was on the very edge of the away section closest to where the Brighton fans were on the sidelines. And, so you can see their eyes, you can see their faces, and they were just loving it, absolutely loving it. And, to their credit, they running into a lot of them outside the stadium after the game. We hung around for quite some time, went to pubs near the train station afterward. Not a hostile fan base. They were certainly kind and hospitable, but it's easy to be when you just beat Arsenal 2-1 at home.
Mm-hmm. So let's go to the AGM.
Yeah, I had the great opportunity. I mean, after we had Tim Payton on our podcast in November, who is the, I guess we could say he's the founder or the president of or certainly on the board of the Arsenal Supporters Trust. I decided to join the Arsenal Supporters Trust, and I recommend anyone who likes to stay involved. And frankly, it gets you albeit minuscule, it gets you an actual piece of ownership of the club and some influence and say on it. But I'd been noticing every couple of months that there were Supporters Trust meetings in London, the last one being in January. And I thought, well, that would be great if there's a meeting in the 2 or 3 weeks that I'm in London, but it probably won't work out. Well, this one was not only a meeting, it was the annual general meeting of the Supporters Trust. And for the first time, I think in quite some time, they had a former player, Lee Dixon, who was speaking and kind of joining everybody at the meeting. And by this point, and it's just to let people know, it's about 3:30 in the morning UK time, about middle of the evening in the US. Twitter has already blown up with reports of what Lee Dixon has said and the comments that he's made. And some of the things that he said are being reported accurately. Some of them are being reported very sensationally, and people are just completely taking from that what they want to hear. But I have to say it was a pretty unique experience to be there. I mean, Lee was class as far as I'm concerned. Not everything he said about Arsenal or about Arsene Wenger, or certainly about some of the current players, were all that complimentary. But it was not. Well, but it's being reported as though he just basically decided to turn the final screws in Arsene Wenger's coaching career and completely smash him. And that is just, I can't say strongly enough that was not the context. That was not the, I'll go over some of the things he said. He was quoted as basically saying that Ashley Cole became one of the best left backs in the world, if not the best back in the world. Not necessarily, now I'm paraphrasing, not necessarily because of Arsene Wenger's coaching, but more because of Tony Adams' influence playing next to him. Now, I was there when he answered that question, and he didn't say, and more importantly, the tone of what he was saying was not that Arsene Wenger, didn't ever coach Ashley Cole, that Tony Adams coached Ashley Cole. He was talking about the importance of leadership on the pitch and how playing next to Tony Adams, made Ashley Cole the player that he was. Now it certainly was, in the context of Tony Adams was more influential than Ashley Cole than Arsene Wenger was, but it's people just running with the comments and the quotes and just looking at it like a complete bash job on Wenger, and it really wasn't meant to be. But it's just interesting, his viewpoints on so many different things, and I don't know if there's some reason he has an axe to grind against Arsene Wenger. I don't believe that there is. He was as positive and complimentary towards Arsene Wenger as he was critical. You wouldn't know that from the Twitter coverage of the event, because the sensationalistic things are the comments he made about Arsene Wenger. But you can tell that he loves the club, that he would get involved in the club as much as he possibly could if he were asked. Other than quitting his punditry job, which he says he's very comfortable with, but it pains him to see what's happening, and he just again confirmed the many things that we've heard on many occasions with regards to the management style of Arsene Wenger and how he goes about his coaching and kind of the consolidation of power at the club underneath him. It's not working anymore.
No. And, unfortunately, these ex-players get thrown under the bus so quickly. And what's crazy to me is, they took that poll and 88% of people or 85% of people said that Arsene should leave the club. So, unlike a couple years ago, we're now in a majority decision. So why are people coming out with this agenda against Lee Dixon? That's what I don't get. All of a sudden it becomes this anti-Arsene bashing. And it becomes this, Lee's out and he's turning the screw and all this. It's so ridiculous, our Twitter fan base. And I think a couple weeks ago he was lit up as well, for being like called an alcoholic or something on Twitter. I mean, the poor guy, our fan base drove Ian Wright to leave, and we don't want to lose someone like Lee Dixon. And for my money, Mike, because I know a lot of our listeners are in England and they don't get Lee Dixon as the color commentator. He's fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And the one thing is, when he's commentating on Arsenal and we concede a goal or we're losing, you can hear the pain in his voice. And you can hear him have to catch himself from saying something on television because he does get so frustrated. So why are we not giving this guy a pass? And why is someone fucking videotaping him in what's supposed to be, I would assume, a safe zone?
Let me tell you about that guy. And I won't use his name, but when I saw that video, I mean, I knew exactly who it was, because that guy was being a complete prat the entire. I mean, they would ask questions. He would ask a question that was 5 minutes long, mostly about himself. Wait for the answer, and then try to follow up with multiple questions. I mean, this guy tried to monopolize a meeting from the beginning. Then, half an hour after the thing was over, and seeing a video from the seat that he was sitting in, and I mean, obviously the picture on his account, I mean, it wasn't like it was a mystery who it was. This guy's posting a picture, a video, not only of something that really, I mean, it was known that information was going to get out. I wasn't tweeting from the meeting. I took notes on what was said so that we could talk about it. And perhaps, I tried to shed some light on some things. There were people that were tweeting from the meeting. That's fine, whatever. But, to tweet video, I thought was completely out of line. And not only that, but he tweeted it at Hector Bellerin as a taunt. You gotta wonder whether that comes from the recent back and forth with some folks that we know and Hector Bellerin, but it just was completely classless. He did say at the first point of the meeting that it was his first supporters trust meeting. I have no question that it will be his last, because that was just absolutely classless.
I mean, this is also the idiot who gets Mahrez on the back of his shirt.
It wasn't like they came out and said at the beginning of the meeting, nothing that leaves this room. I mean, there was one comment that was made, I will say, by Lee Dixon, and I'll tell you offline, but it was basically, I'll deny to the death that I said this, and it had nothing to do with Arsene Wenger, by the way. It was something completely different. It was about 89, and I hope that doesn't get out, because it would be nice if people could actually respect the safe zone of things that were being talked about in that meeting. But just classless on that guy's part. But enough about that. I do actually, now along the lines of passing along information, I do have some notes that I wrote down of things that he said, and again, what he said about Arsene Wenger and the way he coaches. Now, I've heard him say this before on interviews, and I've heard others say this, and you and I both know that we've talked to people that have said this, but he says Arsene is a hugely intelligent and lovely man. He's a master, and now I'm adding, because the context of it was that he knows more about football than most, but he's not a coach. He doesn't stop training sessions and move you about. That's not his skill set. Which we know that. I mean, he's sending players out there. He's kind of designing the team and the overall character, and then sending them out there to. The problem with that, it doesn't allow his assistants to fill that role. Then they're not getting the instruction that they need, and that, in my eyes, is why these players that we bring in that have shown quality elsewhere are now turning into complete flops. Is Xhaka as bad as he's been? Is Mustafi maybe? There were not very nice things said about Mustafi at this meeting by Mr. Dixon. But these players are regressing, and it's because, in my opinion, they're not getting the type of coaching. And he again confirmed that tonight. There are a few other things. He did say about Theo Walcott, I would have loved to have spent 10 minutes with him because he thinks that Walcott was absolutely wasted at Arsenal, not getting the kind of coaching and development that he could have. And he actually suggests that now that he had a couple things to say about Big Sam. He said, Big Sam's not the coach. He's not a better coach. He's not, the best coach in the world, but he will get the most out of players based on giving the proper attention to him. And he said, I expect Theo to come good over the next couple seasons because he's actually now going to, get him moving again. So,
well, when you bring in the likes of a Theo and an Ox, and they are very good young players, the worst thing you can hear is you don't have a manager who stops in training and makes those tiny adjustments, because that's what they need at a young age. That's how they excel. And so, for as much hate as we've given Theo over the past, Mike, imagine the player he would have been if he had 5 years of Pep Guardiola.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's aggravating to keep making the Pep Arsene comparison, but it's hard not to. Because it's just the polar opposite style, and frankly, of late, polar opposite results.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things also that, just switching gears a little bit, one of the other comments that he made that I thought was very telling about this club, and I don't know where this has gone wrong, but the fact that this club has no sense of itself. All of the pieces of the history of this club, the days where we had, Londoners like Kevin Campbell and even Northerners like Lee Dixon, who came to this club at an early age and really, learned from those who had been there before him what it meant to be, to be an Arsenal player. There's just none of that anymore. And the biggest example of this that I think is just shocking is that when they had the premiere of '89, the film, he said the entire first team, the entire reserves, or I guess the academy setup was invited to come to that premiere. The only player that came was Jack.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I don't understand how it was even an option.
I know. I was about to say that should be mandatory.
And maybe not even the premiere, because at the premiere, Hector Bellerin gets to show off a new outfit and a new hairdo, and that's what it's all about for him, and he could care less about the film. But they should have been sat in a room together to watch this film and be reminded of what it's all about to play for this club. And, and no one at that club now knows what it's like to play for that club and what it means and what it should mean, other than Jack.
Mm-hmm.
Rambo maybe a close second, but I mean, it's just a bunch of mercenaries there now. And, unfortunately, you can hold that against them, and Arsenal's not unique in the mercenary category by any means. But when you have a club with the history of Arsenal, and you have a club where we're playing the Arsenal way, and which goes well before Arsene Wenger came involved in 1996, it's incumbent on the coaches in some leadership capacity to try to instill that in their players. And unfortunately, the man that should be doing that is Steve Bold. And again, we learned tonight, from his good friend Boldy, from Lee Dixon, how little capability he really has to make his mark at Arsenal. I mean, he really, he said a couple years ago, he started to have some ability to really coach the defense and spend a lot of time with them. And they started off the season pretty brightly, and then it kind of went away, was what he said. Bold's ability to influence the team was kind of taken away or just minimized, and he's back to basically just being a stooge sitting next to him on the bench, and he couldn't really explain why he puts up with that.
I was about to say, the big question is, why do you remain? And I think if Arsene stays through next season, which is looking very unlikely, I don't think Bold will stay. I could see him walking.
I would lose all respect for Steve Bold if he does stay.
Yeah.
Because, as much as, and this is really what Lee was saying, he said, as much as he's being minimized there and isn't being allowed to do the things he can do, it's a unique situation to be able to be close to the club and contributing in some way. But as the years go by and he's just sitting there and he's not going to be the success of this, it's not like a situation where, I think Ryan Giggs was at least under the impression that he was potentially going to get to succeed Angal, and it just never happened. Bold knows that he's not under consideration for the job as far as I'm concerned. So he needs to, maybe it's a step down, maybe it's a championship club, but he needs to get out of there before it's too late for his, not to sound like a Joel Campbell situation, but he needs to stand up for himself and say, look, I need to go where I can actually, let my coaching do the talking instead of just sitting here looking frustrated and impotent.
You almost have to wonder if his aspiration is to take over as the head coach, or is he gonna be happy if another manager comes in? So, if a manager comes in tomorrow that replaces Arson, the first thing he's probably gonna do is he's gonna keep Boldy around for two reasons. First, Boldy knows the players. He knows the system in place. He's going to help integrate this new manager to come in. New manager probably brings in his own backroom staff, but Boldy's probably removed as assistant manager, and he's given like a coaching role where it's just defensive. Great. That's probably what he wants.
Let's say you're Hector Bellerin, and all of a sudden, I'm sorry to interrupt, but let's say you're Hector Bellerin, and all of a sudden you've got the same coach in Steve Bold, but all of a sudden now he's talking and he's coaching and he's giving info. Are you gonna tune him out because you're so used to not hearing from him in the first place? Or
I think it's new breath. I think it's new light. I don't think you tune him out. I think if anything, it's like bringing in someone brand new. It's refreshing. And if someone
would they respect him?
I'm sorry.
Why would they respect him?
Because again, Mike, I mean, he hasn't been given the opportunity to coach. So I don't think it's a matter of respect. I think it's a matter of them understanding, like, well, hold on a second. Because my second point was, the first point was you help the new coach in bed. The second is you're a legend at the club. And that in itself deserves respect. And when you're a Bellerin, and let's use Koscielny as an example, right? Because Bellerin's been getting a lot of hate. If you're Koscielny, if you're Mustafi, if you're Kalashnic, Nacho, you are hearing a new voice. You know of his past. It's not like you walking in and being like, cool, I'm your new defensive partner training, and here we go. You're looking at someone who's written the history of this club. And so I think that he gets a pass. But it's sad because we know how good our defense could be if we allowed players like that to play. And it kind of highlights to us why we haven't kept other Invincibles on, because they're not allowed. I think the only coach, Mike, that's probably given freedom is Lehman, because when you're a goalkeeping coach, you kind of have to coach your goalies. It's a little bit different.
We have a goalkeeper coach that is that his name? And everyone hates him. There's the reason that Chesney didn't come back to the club, among others.
I don't know if that's 100% confirmed. That could be all hearsay, but we're going down a tunnel that we don't really know specific. But any other takeaways from the AGM?
Well, it was just a class event to be at. Lee had time for everybody. Took pictures, signed things, and people had kits, and I had a program from a game program from 1989 where he was the centerfold. They used to have centerfolds of the players, fully clothed, of course,
which you didn't like. That's why it was ripped up.
Yeah, well, I actually I asked him to sign his piss, but he refused. All right, so after the meeting was over, about a dozen of us or so, maybe about 8 to 12 of us, went across the way to across the street. Lee came up a few points and just continued to talk about just anything and everything. I mean, it's amazing to hear his viewpoints on things. You expect athletes in today's world. Maybe maybe not everybody, but you and I living in the United States and where athletes are coached from public relations and just no one will say anything controversial, and if they do, it's immediate national news. People don't speak their minds. So would you rather have heard a Lee Dixon who was being politically correct and just talking out of both sides of his mouth so as not to say anything controversial? Would you rather have somebody who's being honest, for better or for worse? And I think we got the latter from him, and he may have said some things that he might regret, or at least regret being publicized the way they are, because they were fairly negative. He said some positive things that people are completely ignoring because of their own agendas. But he was honest, just brutally honest in every sense. And frankly, our current batch of players got it much, much worse than Arsene Wenger did in this meeting. But people aren't really talking about that because it's all about.
Well, Mike, I thank you for staying up late and forcing yourself to recount the tales of the AGM. and I think that it's nice to hear, the opinion of someone who was there rather than the keyboard warriors who are just stating,
It's quite amazing how quick. I will say, I mean, I'm looking around the room and seeing a lot of people who look like supporters, who look like people who probably don't spend a lot of time on social media, and within an hour of the meeting, there's quotes, both correct and incorrect, just coming from every angle. I mean, now I'm thinking 50% of the people there probably were just plants that were working for a website. I mean, it's amazing. It was an education on social media tonight for me because while I've known this for some time, being in a pretty closed environment where information was being disseminated and then seeing how it gets out to the mass public and how wrong and just contextually void ends up being, it was a lesson for me. But great experience. I want to thank the Arsenal Trust for being so accessible. I mean, they did me no special favor. And as a member, I was able to come tonight, and the timing worked out. So, but it was just a nice environment. So I want to thank them, and thanks to Akil, who recognized me to ask a question, and just nice time overall. And now I'm off to Milan on Thursday, where there's supposed to be a countrywide transportation strike for the one day that we're going to be there. So Joey and I are going to be probably walking with our back to the set, being stabbed left, right. Story one way or the other off because it's your typical strike on the 8th of March. But I don't see how we're going to get a goal in Milan.
No.
We're not doing a game preview of Milan, but it's going to be kind of a massacre, I think. And off to Sutton tomorrow night to see our boys at Sutton.
Nice. Well, again, we appreciate you staying up late, and we'll be potting post Milan.
Yeah, definitely do something post Milan, maybe post Milan and post Watford, where I will be sitting with the lovely Ola and T-Bone Canton, and looking forward to that. So, have a good week.
You too.
And come on, you Gooners.